We wait maybe 1 minute for more members, then we start. Thank you.
Sure. Okay.
Already live streaming is on.
Yeah, let it be. Let the slide be there so people can see.
Okay.
Pramit, where is Supriyo ji?
I have no idea. He said he will join. Can I call him up once?
Please ring. Once he's come in, then we can start.
Okay. Yeah.
Guide is must.
Sir, আপনি জয়েন করুন, ওখানে আপনাকে ডাকছে সবাই, ফ্লু হয়ে গেছে না, আপনাকে ভিউসে দেখতে পাচ্ছেন না, বলতে আপনি জয়েন করেন, কিন্তু আমাকে বললো কল করতে হবে। হ্যাঁ, বাট আপনাকে আইআইটি এর লিংক দিয়ে জয়েন করতে হবে, সেটা আলাদা করে পাঠিয়েছি। হ্যাঁ, ওইটা না, ইউটিউবটা করলে আপনার ইউটিউবটা করতে হবে না স্যার, আপনি অন্যটা করতে হবে। আমাকে আর আপনাকে মেল করেছিল যে পরে, আজকেই করেছি একটু।
Okay, so the guide also joined. So Dr. Krishnan said he will be a bit late today, so but he gave the consent to go ahead. So shall we start, sir?
Yeah.
Sir? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, so welcome all. Today is the Ph.D. Synopsis seminar or webinar of Pramit Debarman, scientist in IITM. So he will be presenting for another 30-40 minutes and then questions and answers after all. Welcome all, and now I request Pramit to start his presentation. Thank you. Pramit, please unmute your mic, don't forget.
Hello?
Yes, yes, but your sharing has stopped. Please open the PPT. Yeah, good.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
So am I visible and audible both? My screen?
Yes, you are. Please continue.
Okay. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Pramit Debarman. Today we'll be talking on my PhD studies titled Carbon Sequestration Studies in Forest Ecosystems using Tower-Based Observations and GPP-NEE Modeling that I pursued as a registered candidate in the Savitribai Phule, Pune University under the kind supervision of Dr. Phule and Professor Anand Kumar Paribodh. So I have arranged this talk in the following sequence. First, I'll tell you about the significance and motivation, then the objectives of the thesis, then the data I have used and the methodology, then the representative results, then the summary, scope of future work, and then the list of publications, and then the representative references. So I'll now directly go to my chapter 1, which contains introduction and objectives of the thesis. So we all know that the rising concentration of greenhouse gases is the primary driver of climate change, among which CO2 is the primary greenhouse gas. And when I started my PhD in 2018, February, that time the global average atmospheric CO2 concentration was around 406 ppm. But now you see, when I came back to you for my PhD synopsis presentation, it has already become 411 ppm. And there is no denying this fact. In fact, global carbon budget lists out the major dominating sources and sinks of atmospheric CO2. According to that, the latest carbon budget, the sink strength of land stands at 3.2 plus minus 0.6 gigaton of carbon per year, which is actually the largest, even surpassing the ocean at 2.5 plus minus 0.6 gigaton of carbon per year. So to know about the land carbon sink, we must know about what ecosystems are doing. For that, we need continuous long-term observations of CO2 flux using ground-based carbon flux measurements. As you can see from this picture, globally there are quite a dense network of all these CO2 concentration flux towers, but over Indian region, these are severely misrepresented. This results in a lot of uncertainty in the global CO2 carbon cycle upscaling studies done using models as well as synthesis data. However, using the available data from satellite and reanalysis, which of course is not the actual representation of the Indian carbon cycle, the average predicted GPP over Northeast India is around 1.5 to 2 kilogram of carbon per meter square per year. That is where I come in. That is where I came in actually. I thought of doing my confining my work over Northeast India to compute the carbon cycle, the carbon sequestration capacity of one Northeast ecosystem. Now, before I go into my results, I would like to tell you about the terms that I will be frequently using in this presentation. So these all terms are related to the carbon cycle. So basically, we measure NEE, that is the net ecosystem exchange, which stands for the net carbon exchange between the plants, that ecosystem, and the atmosphere. It is a combination of different carbon pools, as you can see in this schematic. But broadly, it is a resultant of GPP, that stands for the gross primary productivity, and the respiration components, it's autotrophic respiration and heterotrophic respiration. And net primary productivity, that is the carbon gained by the plants. So plants actually respire a bit of carbon that they get from the atmosphere. So the net gain, that is known as NPP. Now, in terms of how do I relate all these terms with my measurement setup? So when we select any flux tower, we directly measure the NEE, and then this NEE, that if it is negative, then it means that the ecosystem is absorbing carbon from the atmosphere, acting like a sink. But if it is positive, that means the ecosystem is actually losing carbon to the atmosphere as a source of CO2. Now, this NEE, as I was telling you, is a combination of two large fluxes. One is the photosynthesis, that is GPP. Another is the total ecosystem respiration, that is a combination of autotrophic and heterotrophic respiration, and also a part of soil and microbial respiration. In our
Pramit, you should excuse me that your voice is cracking. I think, can you please log out and log in and try again from this point onwards? I'm extremely sorry for this.
Okay.
Yeah, so probably you have to log out and log in again. Yeah. I request members to close their video so that any bandwidth issue also may help us.
So I'll close the window and open it.
Yeah,
again.
completely log out and come back again to this IITM VC.
Okay.
The YouTube audience also is telling sound cracking.
Yeah, that's why we ask him to re-log in again. Yeah, please share now, Pramit.
Hello, am I audible?
You are audible. We need to wait for your slide.
Yes, I've already shared my slide.
Far better. From this point onwards, please continue.
Okay. Yeah. So then I'll come to my objectives of my thesis. So the objectives are to investigate the seasonal, interseasonal, and diurnal variations of atmospheric CO2 flux, moisture flux, and other associated weather and soil variables measured by micrometeorological tower-based sensors at a deciduous forest over Northeast India, followed by evaluate ISM estimated fluxes for carbon, that is GPP and NEE, and water and energy, that is sensible and latent heat energy, using in situ observations at KN, where ISM stands for the Integrated Science Assessment Model. I'll come to its detail in the data and methodology section. And to extend GPP and NEE estimation at other forest ecosystems using ISM. I'll go to my next chapter, that is the data and model. So I have used the flux tower data, as you can see from this figure, over Kaziranga National Park, a broadly deciduous forest in the Northeast India, as part of the Medflux India network. And towards fulfilling the third objective, my thesis, I've also used the data from two forest ecosystems, that is in Barkot and Haldovan. So briefly, these towers are instrumented at multiple levels. These have got multiple towers basically within the soil and in the atmosphere, and also the plant physiological measurements. But briefly, these are the towers and sensors. Right now, I'll skip this, but if anyone is interested, I'll be explaining in detail. So radiocovariance data, that is high frequency data, that needs to be filtered using a lot of techniques to error all the gaps and all the errors, measurement errors, and these all are listed as follows. These all are implemented actually to my data. And then while partitioning the NEE into respiration and photosynthesis, we first compute the total ecosystem respiration, followed by the equation given by Lloyd and Taylor. I'll be referring to this equation quite often, and this equation is given as follows. It is based on a regression between the temperature and nighttime ecosystem exchange, and this has been done using the RediffRock R package developed by MPI ENA. And this is a schematic of the model that I have used. It's a rough schematic, but you can see it is quite complicated. It's a global diffusion model with a spatial coverage of 0.5 by 0.5 degree and variable time resolution of 30 minutes to 1 hour. And it can be run using the in situ measurements that I have done in my studies. It can also be run using the site level metrology from M7 reanalysis data or any gridded data products or even satellite data products. It has got different components using soil biochemistry, land biochemistry, plants and biophysics and all these components. Now I'll come to the results. So the chapter 3 that concerns about the diurnal, seasonal and annual variations of NEE, GPP and PER of a broadly deciduous forest, that is the Kaziranga National Park. So in this park actually we have broadly deciduous forest where the average canopy height surrounding the tower is 20 meters and the tower is a 50 meter tall tower where, following the micrometeorological rule, the radiocovariant sensors are installed at 37 meters. That is almost or more than the 1.5 times the canopy height. So in this slide, what I'm showing you, and according to the CWA climate classification, this region falls under the tropical humid condition CWA classification. And here, if you can see, this is the annual pattern of temperature, pressure, and precipitation. The interesting point, apart from temperature and pressure variation, is in the precipitation. In this particular region in Northeast India, it receives a lot of rainfall in the pre-monsoon months, that is during April and May. This pre-monsoon shower actually is quite significant and often comparable to the monsoon months. So I calculated the NEE, GPP and PER of these ecosystems using the CO2 flux measurements, and these all are plotted at daily scale. This data is gap filled and flux partition and then plotted at daily average scale. At daily average scale, if you sum up, then the NEE, annual NEE, that comes around 207.51 plus minus 157.37 gram carbon per meter square per year, which clearly shows that in 2016, this forest ecosystem lost this much carbon to the atmosphere, working as the source of carbon. When I partitioned it into GPP, that is the photosynthetic uptake and respiratory uptake.
Pramit, we are very sorry, but your voice is very cracking. Both the audience and members are suggesting pause for a while, and we'll try to find a solution. Nothing we are able to hear. It's very cracky.
No, actually, when he normally speaks, it is clear. Only when he presents, it is problem. I think if he is close to the mic, no. It may be clear. Can you,
Mike,
can you come closer to the mic?
Actually, sir, I'm wearing the headphone. So, can you hear me now?
when you speak, it's very clear. But
when you speak with the PowerPoint, that is a problem.
But PowerPoint is still on. But
yeah, can you speak now? Can you speak?
Yes, I am speaking now. Is it okay? I mean, my voice is audible to you, and can you understand what I'm saying?
Now it is crystal clear. But can you maintain this? I don't know why it is not happening in the other time.
Sure. Yeah, I was in fact maintaining this, but since you told me, I'll try even to strictly follow this. And if this setup works fine, can I go ahead?
So
It is audible now.
it is audible now. So can you say, for example, move 1 or 2 slides?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Sorry for the interruption. Anyway, so as I was telling you, if I partition this NEE into GPP and PER, then you can see in 2016 this forest absorbed 2,604 gram carbon per meter square per year of CO2 from the atmosphere, and it lost 2812.38 gram of carbon in the same period actually. So I will investigate the reason in my subsequent slides, but before that I would like to draw your attention to this pattern. You can see that at annual scale there is a clear bimodal pattern in the photosynthetic uptake, and the interesting question is why. The photosynthetic uptake picks up in pre-monsoon time, as if you can see my cursor, then in this month, actually in the month of May, towards the end of May, and also in the month of September. But why is this dip in between the monsoon? I'll come to the answer in my subsequent slides. But this type of bimodal feature is not observed in many of the ecosystems. In fact, in literature, there is only another ecosystem in South Korea where this type of bimodal pattern is observed, which makes it very interesting. Here I have plotted the incoming solar radiation that is given by RG, also known as the global radiation, and the
Pramit, again it is breaking, Pramit. I think the reason is unknown. So can you hold it for a while?
See, I think he may be using. He can use an external microphone. That may make it better.
No, what microphone he is using?
External only. He's a headphone.
Yeah, I have a headphone.
No, microphone. Is it built-in microphone?
Yeah, it's built-in microphone.
So external generally gives better output.
No, I think it's a microphone issue.
Yeah, it is microphone issue.
Because now your voice coming clear, but
your voice is clear. His voice is clear. Okay. Only Pramit's voice is cracking. That is the issue. So it is a microphone issue only.
Now, when only while he is going intense talk.
Yeah. So, Pramit, can you borrow somebody else laptop?
Laptop.
Milind was offering that he can present from his room. This is for your information. Is it possible? Milind,
yeah, that is.
Milindji just a message in the
yeah,
YouTube.
that is okay. 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 Okay, sir, I'm going to Milind sir's room. Okay.
I'm sorry for the trouble.
This is really.
Is going to Pramit's room now.
Actually, he is not speaking properly to the microphone.
Thank you, sir. Hello?
Yes.
Hello.
Is my voice clear? Am I audible to all of you?
Now you are audible, but we are unable to maintain it. That's the issue.
Yeah, that is the problem. Yeah.
No, I got a headphone with speaker from Dr. Jogesh Tiwari, so I'm using that.
Okay.
So I think we can try. We can try in this setup.
Yeah. Then please continue.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I'm zooming again. So so in this plot, I have plotted the daily values of global radiation, that is the incoming solar radiation, in black, and also the part of the heat that is known as the photosynthetic photon flux density, which is basically the electromagnetic radiation in the 400 to 700 nanometer range. Now, why am I interested in this? Because if you notice the name photosynthetic photon flux density, that clearly tells this is the quantum zone where the plants do the photosynthesis. Now, if you see that in the month of June and July, right in between of monsoon, the value suddenly dropped. The RG suddenly dropped to the value of almost comparable to the winter months. That is why, the reason being, there is coverage of convective deep dark clouds, which actually hindered the penetration of incoming shortwave radiation to the canopy, creating this problem. That is why the photosynthesis actually got hindered, resulting in that dip in the gross photosynthetic uptake, and also eventually resulting in reduced carbon uptake and turning it to be a source of atmospheric CO2. And also, if I can tell you about the monthly total, you can clearly see that in the month of May it is maximum around 367, and in the September also it is second maximum almost around 300 gram carbon per meter square per month. So that is what explains the bimodal behavior. Now, so remember, the Kaziranga ecosystem sequesters maximum carbon in the month of May in pre-monsoon, and this point I'll come back again from alternate point of view. Now here I have plotted the seasonally average diurnal variation of net ecosystem exchange, and here also you can see, being a deciduous forest, there is a clear difference between the seasons. In pre-monsoon, monsoon and post-monsoon, uptake is maximum, which is given by the negative most value during the daytime, around -15 micromole CO2 per meter square per second. And also, if it is an old forest, if it's for any plants actually, or for any living objects, if it is uptaking food, it will also respire back to turn that food into energy for its own physiological purpose. And that is where you see at the night time respiration is also quite high. But in winter, this amplitude between the nighttime respiration and daytime uptake is reduced. Now, I have already told you that the pre-monsoon is the most preferable season by this ecosystem for photosynthesis. And here I have plotted the Michaelis-Menten relationship, which actually links these two, which actually links the photosynthetic uptake to the available photosynthetic photon flux and its respiration. If you can see this red curve that shows the pre-monsoon time, and initial slope of this curve is known as alpha, or the photosynthetic quantum. Apparent photosynthetic yield. I'm sorry, it's apparent photosynthetic yield. If you can see the apparent photosynthetic yield, it is actually largest in pre-monsoon. So in the pre-monsoon, the canopy responds faster to the available light, and also it saturates at quite a larger value of photosynthetic quantum photosynthesis values, or NEE. But in case of monsoon, the initial slope is also less, and also you can see that it is saturated at quite a less value. It again reiterates the fact, and in winter it is totally different. The slope is also quite less, and it is saturating much earlier, and at a very less amount of ppm, which is understandable because it is winter, so radiation is less. So this clearly reiterates the fact that pre-monsoon is the most preferable season for photosynthesis by this ecosystem. And this is in fact reflected in its leaf area index. Leaf area index is a measure of the fullness or the growth of the canopy. And here you can see this black line and dot. This represents our in situ measured LAI values at this ecosystem, which is minimum in winter at around 0.5 and maximum at pre-monsoon around 3.25. But I compared it also with the MODIS derived LAI to see whether MODIS can capture this phenology of this ecosystem quite well, since this MODIS LAI is widely used in many of the modeling studies. But as you can see, this MODIS actually is not able to capture the magnitude as well as the variation or seasonality of this ecosystem in any particular way. It is actually not a good measure of this ecosystem LAI. So I emphasize this point. For ecosystem monitoring, we need to measure the LAI at the ground level. So the key outcomes, as I have already explained to you, these are all listed here, and I'll directly go to our next slide. I will not spend much time here, but if you're interested, I can come back to it later. So this chapter is the diurnal and seasonal and annual variations of ecosystem atmosphere, water and energy fluxes at this broadleaf deciduous forest. So here I have plotted the seasonally averaged diurnal pattern of all the surface energy budget components. And interestingly, this canopy always acts as a well-watered ecosystem throughout the year, even in the dry winter time, albeit with a variable capacity, which results in its beta value, that is the Bowen ratio, the ratio of sensible and latent heat flux, always being less than 1. Even in the winter time, it is less than 1. So you can see it always works as a well-watered ecosystem. Now there is a metric which actually connects the stomatal carbon gain, that is photosynthesis, and also the stomatal water loss, that is the transpiration. At ecosystem level, we connect these two as the ratio between GPP and evapotranspiration, which is known as the water use efficiency. As you can see here, in the pre-monsoon, the slope of GPP-NEE, that is maximum. That means the most water use efficient season is the pre-monsoon, where the ecosystem is gaining 2 grams of carbon with loss of 1 kilogram of water. But in winter, it is losing 1 kilogram of water only in exchange of even less than 1 gram of carbon. So that again reiterates that pre-monsoon is the most favorable for photosynthesis at this ecosystem. Now I have plotted the evapotranspiration or latent heat flux as a function of ppFT. Here also, if you see in the pre-monsoon season, that is the top left panel, LAE is rising at the fastest rate with ppFT, but in winter, it is actually, the rate is actually slowest. So again, the same fact, maximum in pre-monsoon and most minimum in winter. I partitioned this evapotranspiration into its two components, that is evaporation and the transpiration, the physical part and the biological part. Here also, if you can see, transpiration, that is the left panel, that always dominates the evaporation, except in the season of pre-monsoon where they are comparable. Transpiration and evaporation comparable. So the point is, in any time of the year, transpiration is always quite strong. That means the photosynthesis is quite strong and the stomatal exchanges are quite strong at this ecosystem. I tried to compute the surface energy budget, which is actually a measure of the goodness of the data or the representativeness of the ecosystems, but we did not have the continuous measurement of ground heat flux G. So I tried to, using a simple mechanistic model, I tried to find out G from the net radiation using two different linear schemes for daytime and nighttime. So these are represented here, and using this parameterization, what we can see at half-hourly scale, if we do not consider the G, then I get a closure of around 0.69%. With the simple parameterization, it can improve to 0.7%, but if you go to the daily scale, it improves to 80%, which is actually in support of this study by Mauder et al. From IMK, which they say that surface energy closure is largely a scale problem. In the eddy covariance method, we always average at 30 minutes, but if we can have averaging, if we can sample the larger eddies for longer averaging period, then most of our energy budget problems can be solved. And our study is actually a support of that. Then the annual closure using this is around 70%, but between the seasons it varies. And in pre-monsoon it is around 76%, the maximum closure, and in winter also, and in winter again, the closure is least at 62%. So these are the key outcomes as I have already explained to you. I will now go to my next slide, next chapter rather, that is the simulation of ecosystem atmosphere, carbon, water and energy fluxes at this broadleaf deciduous forest. So this model needs these variables as input, which are air temperature, pressure, incoming shortwave and longwave radiations, 2D wind speed, precipitation, specific humidity, and ambient CO2 concentration. Additionally, it also needs to know the soil content, that means the soil texture, which is a ratio of clay, silt, and loam, and also the soil bulk density and LAI. That is very important. Now, this soil texture, our team actually we collected the soil samples and we measured all these things, bulk density and clay silt loam ratio, which we have put in this model to initialize it. Since this model was never initialized over India in any of the ecosystems, we had to do this. And also, it is recommended to have these calibration variables. I will come back to these variables later on. Now, for 2017, we suffered a data gap for almost like 3 months, which we could not fill using any of these available methods, because 3 months is almost like a season, and the phenological response of the ecosystems that vary using among the different seasons. So if you lose a season's data totally, you cannot gap fill it. That is why we lost this data. But to run the model in 2017, actually I have used for calibrating the model along with 2016. I assume that in this period, the weather variables did not vary much, and I took the measurements from 2016. Also, we could not continue the ground-based LAI measurements in 2017 due to some logistic issues. So I actually assume that LAI, the leaf area index variation for a mature forest like Kaziranga, is not very sudden, so the interannual variable will be minimal. So I used a 2016 record as usual, as it is intact for 2017. Now I go to the results. And this is the calibration period. So in 2016 and 17, these 2 years I have used for calibrating my model, and 2018 I have used for validation. As you can see here, and also as I was suggested, I have used the crew NSF reanalysis data for these studies. So here you can see 3 different results. One in black, that is the GPP directly computed from the measurement of NEE. Another is the red, which stands for the GPP modeled using the ISM model and in situ measured weather variables as input. And then the blue ones, which is again modeled, but modeled using the crew and safety analysis data as the input variables. And this color scheme I'll be using throughout the next of my slides, remainder of my slides. As you can see here, in 2016, both these modeled results are able to capture these bimodal peak. Of course, there are variations in their absolute values that I will explain. And in 2017, there was a gap in the measurement, in situ measurement. That is why I have kept this blank. But the model can help here. If you have a gap, the model can give you a continuous record of GPP and NEE. That I will come to my next slide. But from the observations in 2016, the GPP was 2604.9 gram carbon per meter squared per year. Whereas when I ran this model using the site level meteorology, the GPP was 2603 gram carbon per meter squared per year. And the same model, while run with crew and safe, overestimates the GPP at 3272 gram carbon per meter squared per year. Now, in this slide, it is similar to the previous slide, but this gap is filled. So even if you do not have the in situ measurements, if you miss out for some reason and you are unable to fill, these calibrated models can help you getting a continuous time series. Now, in terms of NEE, if we see, then the ground observed NEE from direct measurements that stands at 207.51 gram carbon per meter square per year. But NEE, when I ran ISM using the surface level measurements, that shows minus 275.44 gram carbon per meter square per year. Now, why this discrepancy is, that I will explain. But in the same time, crew and safe driven NEE is even more error prone. That is around minus 776 or 777 gram carbon per meter square per year. Now, in the same period, if I look at the sensible heat flux, then these are almost quite matching well with each other from the direct measurement and the ISM model using the in situ measurements and the crew and safe. They are fairly matching with each other. Even their maximum values and minimum values are matching well at the LE scale. And similarly for LE, as we know that I have already told you, Kaziranga acts as a well-watered ecosystem where the latent heat flux is higher than the sensible heat flux, which you see here. Latent heat flux is higher than the sensible heat flux, which the model is able to replicate. Now, in the validation period, actually, when I run this calibrated model for 2018, without changing any of the model parameters, but running using the 2018 input weather parameters, then we see in this month, the ISM model output predicts 2,430 gram carbon per meter square per year, whereas actual in situ measured GPP is around 2,400 gram carbon per meter square per year, which is fairly matching well with each other. But again, the crew and safe driven GPP, that doesn't match quite well. In fact, it predicts a GPP of around 3,300 gram carbon per meter square per year. In the validation phase, the NEE, by the way, NEE in 2017 for KNP from the measurements were marginal sink of atmospheric CO2 around minus 29 gram carbon per meter square per year. Whereas for this calibrated model gives us minus 62, and the calibrated model run with crew and safe gives us minus 849. Now, if I look into their quantile plots, these are basically the percentiles, I mean the 100 quantiles actually. If you can see here, this left panel compares between the in situ and observed GPP, and the right panel compares between the crew and safe GPP and observed GPP. Top panel is 2016, the calibration period, and bottom panel is the validation period, 2018. You can see the crew and safe reanalysis driven model results can never match the accuracy of the in situ model results, but the in situ model related QQ plot that improves with calibration. I have some another metrics also for this, which I will come in my subsequent slides. And these are the QQ plots for sensible heat flux, and it is quite similar and quite supportive of our observations that I have already explained earlier. And these are the QQ plots for LE. I'm not explaining this in detail because I think I have already explained for GPP, but if you have any question, I'll be happy to answer those. Now the question is, how confident are the model simulations? So for this, I have considered two metrics. One is the RMSE, the root mean square error. that is given as this ERR function. And another is that refined Wilmot's index given by Wilmot's et al. So refined Wilmot's index is considered as a better metric of model performance over RMSE or median, because if your model, if your measurements, in our case actually, our measurements are the best guess estimate of any GPP of the ecosystem. We do not have any other alternate measurements. So our measurements is the closest to the actual world, but it will also have its systematic and random uncertainties. So if you are comparing your model results with some observation which also contain its own uncertainties, then in those cases, refined Wilmot's index acts better. So refined Wilmot's index, that equation of that I have not written here, but I have kept it in another slide. If you're interested, I can show that. Refined Wilmot's index, if its value is closer to 1, that means the model is able to perform in a better way, in a quite efficient way. But if its value is towards the negative marginal value, that is -1, that means the model is not able to perform in a better way. Now, I would like to draw your attention to these values. You can see in the calibration phase in 2016 for GPP, refined Wilmot's index is around 0.66. But with calibration, in the validation phase, it improves to at 0.75. So that means with calibration, the model is actually performing better. And the same thing is iterated in the case of sensibility flux. You see 0.44 to 0.59, that is the improvement of refined Wilmot's index. And also in case of latent heat flux, from 0.62 to 0.70. But in none of these cases, actually, the true NSAP or the reanalysis data-driven simulations that can match the accuracy level of these in situ measured variables-driven simulations. Now, if I look into the water use efficiency, what is the gross scale water use efficiency of these ecosystems as obtained from the direct measurement and as given by the model, then I can see that the model that observed water use efficiency is around 1.27 in 2016, whereas in model it is almost around 2 or even higher if you are running using 2 NSAP. And the similar observations are reported in the subsequent validation phase also. That means the model is always producing more carbon uptake than the ecosystem is actually doing per specific amount of water loss. Now, these are the key outcomes, and I'll go to the last chapter, which is basically and also the part of my, which is actually summarizing my third objective, that is simulating the ecosystem atmosphere carbon exchange of other broadly deciduous forests in India using this model. Yeah, so I have used, so first of all, I would like to say that as I have told you, this in situ measurements of weather parameters and LAI till date are not available from any of the Indian sites. That remains actually a big challenge. None of these sites, these measurements are available. So we had to use the true NSAP reanalysis data for producing the GPP and sensible and latent heat flux for these other ecosystems. And this particular GPP in black, is for this barcode forest, the data was not available. So there was a paper available. I had to digitize that figure from that paper, which is plotted here in black using the QGIS software. And then using the that crude NSAP reanalysis data, I have run the ISM model over this forest. As you can see here, that reported GPP of this ecosystem is around 2916 gram carbon per meter square per year. But when run using the crude NSAP data, the ISM model produces around 1975 gram carbon per meter square per year. For this forest, again, the NEE values were not available directly as a measured file, or so I had to digitize again from their paper, which is again shown in this black dot. And NEE of this ecosystem was minus 508 gram carbon, whereas ISM produced at around almost 71 gram carbon. Now, why this discrepancy? I'll explain. And for another forest, that is the forest at Haldwani. In Haldwani forest, actually, it is a deciduous forest and the same Uttarakhand forest division. Here you can see, but here in this forest, they did not measure the GPP using the in situ measurement of CO2 fluxes. They measured the GPP using the Montet parameter, which is basically a top-down model. That is called the light use efficiency or LUE model in short. So what does it do? In the LUE model, as given by the formulation by Professor Montet, what they do, they assume a parameter called light use efficiency, and that they multiply with the absorbed photosynthetic quantum, that is called the FAPR, the fraction of absorbed photosynthetically available radiation, using that efficiency parameter epsilon or LUV, and then they produce the GPP. Now, what is the disadvantage? Disadvantage is you need to cross-check it with the ground-based measurements using your stock-based GPP estimation or your carbon budgeting or your eddy coefficients measurements. And these models, this model was first used experimentally, or you can say operationally, for the MODIS GPP products. When MODIS was launched, so then they started producing the global GPP products. For that time, since that time they have used this. But before doing that, they could validate their model over North America using this FluxNet measurement network. If you remember, which I showed in my second slide, the dense network of flux towers. That is how Steve Running and Professor Peter Thornton and their group at Numeric Terradynamic Group, they built up this GPP product from the MODIS observations. Now, to cut the story short, in this paper, the authors, that is from this paper, Ahong Shangma et al. 2017, it's a paper by IIRS Dehradun. What they have done, they have computed this LUV-based GPP, which they claim, which they actually report to be around 1500 gram carbon per meter square per year. But when I use the ISM model using the reanalysis data set, then the ISM produced around 2023.6 gram carbon per meter square per year. Remember that the authors themselves reported that their GPP LUV misrepresents the actual GPP in the range of 6 to 30% at monthly scale. Now, this range 6 to 30% depends on the pixels. If you're looking from the top, then you are looking at different pixels of the forest. And different pixels of the forest will represent different zones, which will have different floristic composition of plants. That is why there is this big range of uncertainty. Nevertheless, the ISM is able to produce seasonality quite well. If you can see, for this forest, being a deciduous forest, its carbon uptake is maximum in the post-monsoon, in the months of September and October, and this time it picks up. And also, ISM is quite efficiently capturing this. But in the winter months and pre-monsoon months, it is quite less, which ISM is also kindly replicating. It is not capturing the actual values, but the seasonality quite well. Now, for this forest, the authors did not report the NEE because they did not compute the GPP from the NEE. They computed GPP from that absorbed photosynthetic radiation from the satellites. But I actually modeled the NEE from the ISM model using the crew and safety analysis data, and that shows the NEE of this forest to be around 100 gram of carbon per meter square per year. As of now, we do not have any other method to cross-check it or validate or devalidate it because we do not have any other measurement of NEE over this site. Now I'll tell you what are the insights that I have gained from this observation and model intercomparison. In the direct measurement approach, NEE is measured directly, which is further partitioned into TER and GPP. Now remember, NEE is a very small flux which we are directly measuring, and it is a combination, or it's a resultant of two big fluxes, the photosynthesis GPP and the respiration TER. So basically, this is an ill-posed problem where one equation is solved for two unknowns. Further, NEE, as I was telling you, is a small resultant which is almost of the order of 100, like 2 orders of magnitude less compared to GPP and TER. That actually aggravates these errors and this problem. On the other hand, in case of any process-based ecological model like ISM, there can be other models like ORCID, there can be LPG gas, there can be multiple such models, there can be MIROC. In any of these models, the total carbon fixed by the ecosystem by photosynthesis is first calculated at GPP. And then it is subsequently allocated to different carbon pools, such as leaf carbon, root carbon, bole carbon, stem carbon, fruits, all these things. Then the growth and maintenance respirations are calculated separately based on soil and air temperatures, soil moisture, nutrient type, biome type, location, etc. Now it is very interesting, as you might be knowing, the plants only do the photosynthesis using stomata, which only resides on the leaves, basically at the bottom surface of the leaves in case of most of the plants, that is called the monostomatous leaves, or in some rare variety of plants which is called the amphistomatous leaves, where the stomatas are present on both sides of the leaf. But then it is only on the leaves. But respiration happens from all the body parts of the plants. It can happen from leaf, it can happen from root, it can happen from bole, from shoot, from anywhere. Now, to properly constrain all these equations, you need to measure these variables separately. You need to measure root respiration or soil respiration. You need to measure what is the soil stock, what is the root carbon stock. At quite frequently time interval, you need to do some destructive sampling to know what is the root growth, so that you can parameterize all these equations properly in the model. In our setup, we did not have recourse to any of these measurements. Also, you need to know what is the above and below ground biomass, what is the leaf carbon, what is the nitrogen density. Because in tropical region, our plants are not nitrogen limited compared to the mid-latitude ecosystems, because our plants recycle their nitrogen requirement using this liter fall input. So they are actually self-sustainable. So that is why you need to know what is the liter fall, what is the nitrogen density, also carbon to nitrogen ratio, and all these things. Hence, in the existing setup, it is not appropriate and recommended to compare the measured and modeled TER and NEE one-to-one. Additionally, we need to know what is the sap flow, what is the direct leaf chamber photosynthetic coefficients, what are the leaf nitrogen. These measurements can be done using the leaf chamber or quite frequent monitoring of these plants. Even as I talk to you, there is a measurement called sap flow, which is now a regular measurement and a standard measurement for any of the FluxNet or ICOS or NEON sites, where they directly measure the sap flow. So sap flow is basically the flow of groundwater from the soil till the leaves through the capillary in the woody trunk of the plants, also known as the xylem. So if you can directly measure the sap flow, you know what is the transpirative water loss, and that you can directly compute, that you can directly connect to your photosynthetic carbon gain. So these all measurements will be very useful for such type of studies. Additionally, soil CO2 flux will give us a better understanding of the microbial heterotrophic respiration, that is the forest floor estimation. Remember, while I ran the ISAM, I did not have the soil temperature measurements. So I had to constrain the Lloyd-Taylor equation using the atmospheric temperature measurement. Now, atmospheric temperature is not a proper representation of the soil temperature, but a significant amount of respiration that comes from the soil microbes and soil like your roots and all, which is within the soil, that depend on the soil temperature and soil moisture. We did not have either of these measurements. That is why we could not constrain the respiration equations well. That is why you see the GPP of the model is quite well comparable to our results, but the NEE is not. This is being the reason. I would be happy to explain you further if you have any questions. So now, summarily, what can be the future directions from this study? Personally, I would like to explore the effect of cloudiness on the carbon sequestration process by the other tropical forest ecosystems. As I have seen, it is only in South Korea, only one forest ecosystem reports such studies, but I strongly feel all the Indian ecosystems should be actually studied for this effect. I would like to, I am already working in this direction. I want to study this effect using satellite measurements and, if possible, in situ ground measurements. To conduct more synthesis studies using the available long-term flux measurements at different ecosystems, preferably in India, to comparatively assess their interactions with the atmosphere. Unless and until we bring out these plant-atmosphere interactions, they will not be represented in the carbon accounting models properly. And there will be a lot of uncertainty in the regional and global carbon budgets. As a long-term plan, there is a high requirement to build an integrated data modeling framework for assessing the carbon sequestration potential for Indian natural ecosystems using in-situ measurements and process-based model. Now, as I talk to you from Department of Biotechnology and Department of Ministry of Environment and Forest, there is a data modeling network called IBIN, Integrated Biological Information Network. The IBIN is hosted by IIRS Dehradun, but IBIN is growing, and we should be contributing to this Indian effort by more and more ground-based measurements. And this is also highlighted in the latest climate change assessment report by the MOES. So these have been the journal publications which will be a part of my thesis, and so some of these are under preparation as I talk to you. And then these are some related publications which I had the fortune to work on in this period. I have been associated with these flux studies. And these are several presentations that I could do as part of my as part of my journey in IITM so far. And these are some selected references. And I thank you all for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Pramit, for a very crisp and clear, even though the noise was cracky, so you were very clear. Thank you very much. And now the floor is open for questions, comments from the members as well as audience. Please start.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Dr. Panditare.
Yeah. Yeah, Pramit, it's a good word.
Thank you,
I
sir.
have a question.
Sure.
Many of your comparisons between simulations and digitized or observations were showing a sudden shock around day number 60. What is the reason for that?
Sir, allow
Either
me
it
to
is,
go back to this slide so that I can explain better.
yeah,
Allow me
go
to.
ahead. Yeah. Go to any of your comparisons.
Sure,
with,
sir. I'm going back.
simulations.
But why cannot I go back?
I see a sudden shock around day number 60.
Sir, I'm trying to go back to that slide. Just allow
Yeah.
me a moment. Sir, just allow me a moment. I'm going back. So you mean in this slide?
Yeah,
Understood,
see here.
sir? In this slide?
Yeah, many of these slides, not only this. Here you can see around day number 60.
Okay.
So go to any other slide also, you will see that.
Yeah, sir, I can explain to you. I will, for explaining purpose, I'm using this slide, but the explanation remains same for all the slides. Sir, actually, this photosynthetic carbon uptake and the transpirative loss, so these are forest ecosystems, and these have a quite large life. I mean, the Kaziranga forest is existing for more than 150 years or so. The average tree life is more than that. So these forest ecosystems, they get habituated to the local climate. Now, if you look at the climate, then December, January, and February, this is what we classify as winter. And then March, April, and May are the pre-monsoon or the springtime. Then June, July, August, September is monsoon, right? So roughly first 2 months of the year, that is winter. And these are deciduous forest. So in winter, they don't exchange much of the water. To save water, actually, it is dry season. And also they don't gain much carbon because there is no radiation, temperature is less, and also the soil moisture or the water availability is less. So they get habituated to this long pattern of climate. That is why in the winter months, you don't see much uptake. But in the pre-monsoon, the uptake start increasing. Now, so that is why in the pre-monsoon, you will see the uptake is gradually increasing. Now, you were saying where there is a sudden shock around the time of 60. This is because when we measure the data, we are measuring 18,000 points per half an hour, okay? But then many of these points, they do not fulfill the ideal measurement setup condition, that is integral of turbulence, or that is stationarity of turbulence and all these states. There is a lot of tests listed for that. So you have to actually discard many of these friction velocity tests. You have to discard many of these measurements. When we discard, but we have to do the carbon accounting for the total year, then we have to gap fill this data. While gap filling, these models, they also do it based on the seasonal cycle. Having said that, if you remember in 2017, I could not gap fill the data for KMP. The reason being, entire one season was lost. So all these gap filling mechanisms, they do it, the process is called MDS, or the marginal distribution sampling. In MDS, they assume the seasonality from the long-term variability of weather. And when at that point of time, any of your data points are lost, there will be some sudden jumps like this, what you are seeing. That is why, if at the juncture of the seasons, where the seasons are changing, at that time, if you lose any of your data, measurement data, you are bound to see such effects. Am I able to clarify to you?
No, but that is not seen in any other season transition, one thing. And in pre-monsoon, after 15 days, again it falls even below the winter levels of GPP.
So, okay, sir, which slide? This slide?
No, the same slide.
Okay.
Yeah, in the same slide, you see that there is a factor of 2 jump. Then it slowly, gradually decreases even below the level of the winter GPP.
Yeah, it is, sir, actually comparable to the winter GPP. You are right. It is still in the winter actually. 30 means it is in the January time. And if you look at the local climatology, then January is the coldest month at this particular forest, Haldwani, that is in the Uttarakhand. So that is minimum. And this is actually the modeled output. As I was telling you, if I had recourse to the in situ measured or the flux tower measured temperature and pressure and all, I would not have expected such a variation. It would have been much more, that amplitude would have been much more dampened. But since I have done it using the climate data, which is the true NCEP data, allow me to show you one slide, which I think will explain me in a better way. I have this slide here. I'll just show you. Just bear with me. So this is a daily scale, remember. Now, if I go to seasonal scale, if I go to weekly scale, because your true NCEP data, that is basically a 6-hourly data. It's a climate data. it cannot give you the variability at half-hourly duration. So this is the weekly values of those of GPP actually. Here you see the weekly values. If you average them weekly, then that kind of sudden jumps are not there. So basically, it is due to the gaps in the data, then the seasonality in the data, and also the which type of data you are using. You are using in situ data or you are using reanalysis data, because reanalysis data is a climate data. It cannot be. I mean, if you do not have in situ data, then you can use climate data, but it cannot replace the in situ measured data. So these three reasons are contributing to whatever you are asking.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask one?
Yes.
Yeah. So, Pramit, although I am not an expert of your topic, but your, presentation was very clear and beautiful. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
But I think you missed one slide. That is acknowledgement. You should acknowledge your guide and co-guide.
Sure. So I was just going to do
anyway,
that.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Sir,
because, that's fine. No.
I'm totally sorry for this.
No. Because see, I know the lab which you use, it is really a very specialized, what is called instrument.
Sure, sir.
And many things. So you should gratefully acknowledge the institute and, of course, your guide and co-guide and SPPU and so on. Anyway, now coming to my question. So you use only NCEP reanalysis or two reanalysis you said, right? Or
no, I used CRU NCEP reanalysis, not CRU NCEP. Yeah.
Sorry. So what are the parameters you use from that?
From CRU, I used air temperature, air pressure, then long wave and short wave incoming radiations, then wind, specific humidity, these things.
At what level? Surface or 10 meter? Or?
It is around at 10 meter.
Okay, so only the weather parameters.
Only the weather parameters, yes.
And what you are concluding is that the reanalysis driven simulations, if not exact, but it is able to capture broadly the distribution and the trends, right?
Quite surely, sir. Allow me. So what I'm saying, if you do not have the in situ measurements, because I know this is a quite comprehensive set of measurement that is required, which may not be always possible and feasible. In that case, as a ballparking estimate of your carbon sequestration, you can use this CRU NCEP or NCEP NCAR or any reanalysis data. But then you have to keep in mind this caveat. This will be just a ballparking estimate. This cannot be an exact estimate or very close estimate of the actual carbon sequestration. That's having said that, if you are interested at annual scale, how much is the carbon sequestration, that you can do. But if you are interested at diurnally, how is it varying? What is the pre-monsoon variation of photosynthesis? Those kind of studies should not be done using the reanalysis data. Am I able to clarify myself on this point? Am I making my point?
Yeah, I understood. Now, what I was wondering, because now in India there are some high resolution spatial and temporal reanalysis available. Okay. One is recently, launched by NCMWF, IMDA it is called, and also we have a GFS 12 kilometer reanalysis, analysis, not reanalysis.
Yes.
So I was wondering whether resolution does where more Indian data gets assimilated, whether satellite and also AWS, etc. Because those data doesn't go in NCEP, and NCEP has a very crude resolution.
Yeah.
So whether that could make any difference, and that data also available at 3 hourly rather than 6 hours. I don't know. It may.
Okay.
It may.
Sir, I can answer your point to some extent. I think. Allow me to go ahead. So, am I interrupting you, or you are done?
No, please. I am done. Please.
Yeah. So, if you are using any reanalysis data, or let's say any graded data product, it can be reanalysis, it can be satellite, it can be even a model output from another model, like WRF. So these will have their own resolution spatially, okay, at all the grids. But what defines the carbon uptake is again the LAI, the leaf area index measurement. Now it might so happen that in the forest, if you consider a forest, there can be a particular tree. But then depending on the water availability, there is a particular density that this forest cannot have more than 2 trees per square meter. Just a rough estimate I'm telling you. So there can be dense forest and also there can be sparse forest. Like in the forest in Darjeeling, that is quite dense, but the forest in Kaziranga is not dense. So even if you are getting these values at all the grids, you need to know for each particular grid what is the leaf area index measurement. That is point number one. So having your gridded weather data, be it model or be it satellite or reanalysis, does matter. But what more matters is the physiological measurements, that is LAI. In that case, even the satellite like the MODIS and Landsat LAI are also not able to help us over the India or even subtropical and tropics in general, as I have showed you, because it cannot capture the seasonality. Now coming to the temporal resolution, if you are having a 3 hourly or 6 hourly, you can calibrate the model. Of course, you have to have the soil measurements, like what is the soil type. Can your reanalysis data give you the soil texture? Can your reanalysis give you the soil bulk density and soil water content? Because if it is a clayey soil, like what we get in Indo-Gangetic plain, that can hold more water. But if it is like a very sandy soil, like Kaziranga or the area which gets quite flooded, then there is no, sand cannot hold any water. Anyone knows that. So for that, you also need what is the soil type. Now, NBSS, the National Board of Soil Survey in Nagpur, they have prepared the soil map of India. So basically, if you can combine all these things like weather parameters at gridded level, preferably the LAI measurements at all the grid points, and these soil measurements, then probably your estimate will be better.
Okay, thank you.
Binu, can I ask some question?
Sure, ma'am.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. So, Pramit, a very nice presentation. I'm very happy about whatever you are doing. And see, I have a couple of questions. One is regarding the energy budget closure. I will just quickly go through all that.
Okay.
See, have you considered the footprint analysis in your energy budget closure?
Sure, ma'am. I'll show you that.
No, you don't have to. You can say yes or no. And
yes, I've done.
Yeah, and then the other question is this: have you used the? I think it is getting broken. Or
ma'am, I can hear you. This is the footprint slide, by the way, and you can ask me your question. Yeah.
And have you used the closed budget in your modeling study also?
Ma'am, do you mean that correction of latent reflux by Twine et al? Closing the budget?
Exactly.
Ma'am, actually, in this model, actually, the energy budget is always assumed to be closed. So whatever, like sensible and latent heat flux, whatever is left over, that is channelized into the ground heat flux or some in the, storage terms. So by default in the model, the budget is already closed. But for my work, when I have done using the observational data, I did not use the closure as such, but right now, I mean, it's one part of my ongoing work where I'm comparing this broadleaf deciduous ecosystem at KNP with a mangrove ecosystem at Pichavaram. You might be knowing about that site.
Yeah.
So there I am using that Twine's correction, madam, because it is a mangrove site, so we have to do that because latent heat flux can go anywhere. That is the answer. Yeah.
Then a couple of other things like this screw ends up result, what you have shown, those results are not showing much variability. See,
yes,
the small day-to-day variability is quite less in that. I think you should investigate that factor. And also another point is that whatever numbers you present, you should put a plus or minus. You should put an error bar there, because these are all looked to. Or sometimes it is also looked to by the policy makers, and also please be careful to put that kind of. Some other questions are there which I can ask you later.
Ma'am, actually you are very right. This uncertainty or these error margins actually in the papers these are there. Just to make this, I had so many things to present, and just to make it crisp, I omitted in some places, but your point is well taken, and I totally agree to that. I should have put them in all the slides. I agree with you, ma'am. These are already taken care of.
And also that GPP sudden changes, you should also see whether there were rainfall or because there are other factors come into picture as well. Just like that, you don't assume anything. Go and have a look at the variability. What caused that kind of variability? Okay. Because you need to check whether there was rainfall. The western disturbances are there during winter, what happened, and also in your model whether it includes soil moisture, that also matters. Okay. So soil moisture is a very important parameter for you. So all that, there are some more questions that which due to time limit I'm skipping.
Ma'am, soil moisture measurement is very crucial. As you were saying, we did not have these ground measurements. Our sensors failed actually. I have tried using the GLEAM. There is one model called Amsterdam Global Land Evaporation Amsterdam model, GLEAM by Martens et al. I have tried looking into their root zone and soil zone moisture. So that work is, I'm still doing that. So I cannot tell you conclusively. But the idea was the same, that if I incorporate that soil moisture, then how much like variation, whether it in positive or negative side, I can see. I agree with you, ma'am, regarding the soil moisture point. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Pramit. See, we have to take few questions from the audience also, which they should not keep wait until all the committee done. See, Yogesh, for example, asked, did you calibrate ISAM at different observational sites? So that was his question. So can you please quickly answer?
Sir, I calibrated for 2000. I calibrated ISAM model for 2016 and 17, and I validated that same calibrated model in 2018.
Actually asking about different observational site. So that's the question.
No. Okay. Sorry, I misunderstood. I beg your pardon. I did not have these different site observational data available with me, but I look forward to do that in my subsequent works at IITM, where if I get the available data, let's say from ISRO sites at Betul or maybe at this, Haldwani or any other site, then I can do that. I know how to do it, but I did not get the data.
Okay. So another question from Swati Gupta. She's asking, standard deviation in calculated NEE for Kaziranga forest looks comparable to the value itself. Any insight on that, and how much deviation is generally acceptable in NEE and GPP studies?
Yeah, correct. So that's a good question. So that uncertainty estimate that I showed here, that is a combined measure of random, systematic, and gap filling uncertainty. So there are uncertainties at different levels. There is no such acceptable limit of this. And also remember, the uncertainty was only for 1 year. If you have a longer period of measurement, like 2, 3, 4, 5 years, then your uncertainty will come down, first of all. So whatever uncertainty I showed, that was for 1 year, and that included gap-filled uncertainty, random uncertainty, and systematic uncertainty. If you look at only the random uncertainty, which I have not included in this presentation, that is around ±10. The most of the uncertainties come from the gap-filling uncertainty. Because due to the low turbulence condition, sometimes we lose the data at KNP site, at any particular flux site actually. And those we have to fill the gap. Now, the algorithm you are using to fill the data gap, that has to be trained. So basically you need a long period data. If you do not have a long period data, your gap filling will result in a quite high uncertainty. That is why our uncertainty was quite high. But if I do it for longer period, like 3 or 4 years, it is coming down.
Okay, thank you. And there was a comment by Professor Atul Jain. He is also listening to this. Just for your information, the climate data is available at 0.5 degree resolution, lat by lone, and measured data is at the site level. It's like just a comment. He just would like to pass it to you, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. So, any other comments from the committee members, please?
I have one.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead. Yeah.
In the initial slides, you showed the LAI, where what you measured and what you showed from MODIS there was very little correspondence between the two.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Does it mean that, okay, I'll ask you one thing. How representative is your station for entire Kaziranga? Because
sure, sir.
If you look at MODIS, it will be looked at the entire, much larger region. So that's why I'm asking you this question. Is it because MODIS is completely wrong, or it's kind of sampling a much larger region while you are kind of sampling a very smaller area?
Sir, can I answer this question?
Sure, please go ahead.
You are done. Okay. Yeah. Sir, first of all, your question was how representative is the measurement at Kaziranga, our institute measurement, which actually Dr. Tara was also asking. So that we can estimate using the footprint model. What is the footprint of the flux tower? Now, in this, here I have calculated the footprint, which you show here. So this outermost boundary that shows, so basically how to read this plot? So at the origin, you assume the flux tower is situated, okay? And then these circles actually that show you how much flux is coming from which area of that forest surrounding the tower. So you can see 80% flux at annually average scale is coming from around 550 or let's say maximum of 650 meter of radius around the tower. So that is why the tower footprint is limited to that region only. Surrounding, like it is stretched in a southwesterly to northeasterly, southeasterly to northeasterly fashion because of the mean wind pattern. But overall, you can see it is not stretched beyond 600 meter in any direction. So Kaziranga tower will have footprint of only that region of forest, which is obviously much less than the MODIS LAI. So basically, what is the source of uncertainty in MODIS LAI? It's a good question to explain to you that. So as I told you, first of all, MODIS, what does MODIS do? MODIS measures the reflectance in the near infrared and visible range. Then we know the plants actually absorb radiation in visible and reflect in near infrared. That is why they conclude the normalized different vegetation index or NDVI. Okay, that is the first step. From NDVI, they run these LUE-based models, which is called the Montet model, which is validated over the North American region using the ICOS and FluxNet and Neon network of flux towers by Dr. Running and Dr. Thornton, Professor Thornton. So these models, then they assume this light use efficiency to be valid for entire region based on their latitudinal distribution over entire forest. And using that, they compute the GPP. From GPP, they run another model that is developed by Professor Ranga Maineni at University of Boston and generate the LAI product. So you see, LAI is not a directly measured product. It is a third level product, you can say, which is derived from another derived product, that is GPP. That is the major uncertainty in the MODIS LAI. Had this MODIS GPP been estimated over Indian region at particular forest, then it would have been possible. I would like to tell you, I'm very happy that ISRO SAC has launched one satellite called GISAT. That is a geostationary satellite, and their objective is basically this. They will monitor all the natural ecosystems over India using a geostationary satellite, and they will measure their GPP and LAI. Basically, we got a chance to collaborate with them, and they are actually trying using our data. I mean, they will be using our data to collaborate to actually calibrate their GPP product over the Kaziranga forest actually. So with this type of calibrations, the errors will come down. Now, second part of your question, that LAI, okay, MODIS LAI, that has got a certain spatial resolution, but that certain spatial resolution is not as fine as the Kaziranga flux footprint. Having said that, what I'm trying to say, between two nearest grid points or the pixel values, you will have more spacing compared to the footprint of Kaziranga tower. That is why when I did the comparison, I took the 4 nearest pixels and averaged it out. Still, it was not able to capture the seasonality. If I can go back to that slide, I mean, I think I should better go back to that slide.
Yeah, good to see that slide.
Yeah. Allow me a moment. I'm just going back.
Thank you.
Sir, just a moment, sir. I'm going back.
No problem. Go ahead. It's right at the beginning.
Yeah, it was a slide in the beginning. Yeah, this slide, sir. Yeah. So if in this slide, actually, you see the more error between the in situ measured LAI and the MODIS measured LAI, that you can see mostly in the monsoon times or in the winter times actually. Because in monsoon, we again have this cloud contamination. We have deep, dark, convective clouds. And you remember that these clouds actually hinder the penetration of visible, the photosynthetic quantum to the ecosystem level. That is why if you are looking from the top, you're of course going to overestimate or underestimate, right? You do not have the actual measurement. Although in MODIS there is a particular cloud contamination algorithm, and they give this in the ATBD. If you look at the MODIS GPP or LA ATBD algorithm theoretical basis document, they list out all these flag values. They say this particular pixel was contaminated by cloud, so don't use that. Even if I tried using that, only the best quality values, it still cannot represent the actual LAI. That remains actually a problem, and this has been have been earlier also pointed out by people from Africa, researchers from Africa and another tropical countries. But from India, this is one of the first kind of study. Actually, this I was told to do this by reviewer only, and I did that, and I could see, okay, I could echo. I mean, my results were echoing the results of these another results, which show that over tropical region, MODIS actually overestimates and underestimates. And it is not also about only the absolute magnitude. Entire seasonal cycle is, going haywire here.
Okay.
Sir, do I answer your question?
Yeah. It was quite comprehensive.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Okay, one more question I have in case I can ask.
Sure, sir.
I think in one of the papers, I don't know whether it was your paper or something from your review,
Okay.
There was this one saying in 1 year it is kind of acts as a source and another year it acts as a sink.
Yes.
Yeah. So can you just explain it a little more for me?
Yeah. As I talk to you, that paper, which the lead author and corresponding author, they are different. I am a co-author in that paper, but I can explain to you. So first of all, in 2016, I am going to that slide. In 2016, this forest acted as a source. That is primarily because in the monsoon months, that radiation hindrance was there and photosynthesis got less. I mean, photosynthesis got affected. In 2018, it was a marginal sink, which is around minus 30 gram carbon per meter square per year, which we are still investigating. But based on our initial results, what we see, it is the time of rainfall or the time of cloudiness which affects. Let's say during monsoon, if remember that we are calculating this at half-hourly scale, so any half-hourly variability will be reflected in our daily values. Now, let's say in case of any forest here in Kaziranga, it rains in the afternoon time, when most of the photosynthesis is already done in the daytime around 3 p.m. or 12 to 4 p.m. but it rains around 5 p.m. So in that case, even if there is a lot of cloud, that is not going to affect my photosynthetic uptake. But if it is rain during the daytime, I mean if it is cloudy during the midday, then it is going to affect my GPP. That is one reason. That is, we are investigating and that paper is under review now. Secondly, what I also suspect that in case of this particular site, actually it's a mature forest, and mature forest, basically in the tropical region, it is well known that tropical forests have wider interannual variability compared to the boreal forest or subtropical forest. In tropical forest, we have large interannual variability, and this is, Kaziranga is a mature forest. So basically what it does actually, consider a kid. When the kid is growing, it is uptaking more food, so it is growing. But when the kid is fully adult, then it doesn't take much food to it doesn't need much food to be intaken actually. So its intake is limited. That is why Kaziranga is a mature forest. It is growth, it is not growing anymore. So what we are seeing is mostly interannual variability, which gets mostly affected by this kind of phenomena like cloudiness or year-to-year temperature variation, moisture availability, and all these stuffs. That is why it's well known actually. And after I published this paper, this is reported from this paper. This paper got cited in JGR and another paper, where the researchers from Mexico and all, they also echo our finding. They say that the forest in Mexico and Brazil, they also lost carbon in 2016. And in subsequent years, there was a minor sink. So that is why these dry tropical deciduous forests, their carbon budget is oscillating between different years, partially due to their maturity, their mature forest, and secondarily due to their inherent interannual variability. If we have a longer period of data, like 5 or 10 years, I can come back to you with more conclusive and more concrete evidence of this.
So, I mean, even from 2 years, it doesn't look like it's a major sink, right?
Sorry, sir, I could not hear you. Can you repeat?
I mean, even from 2 years,
yeah,
it looks like it's not a very big sink. I mean, we assume for big sink, but it is not so.
No, it is not so.
It's a matter of concern, right? That's what I want.
Yes.
Can I comment here?
Sure.
Actually, I like to make a comment here. What Promita said, that maturity of the forest, but that may not be the case in reality, because the Kaziranga forest contains about 60% grassland, and grassland, they are seasonal in nature, and woody forest is only 20%. So until and unless we measure what is the characteristic that any pattern over a grassland, we cannot exactly tell about their carbon sequestration potential in this forest. So this is very important that we have a very comprehensive idea about how the carbon is getting sequestered by the woody forest as well as by the grassland.
Sir, whatever Phule had told, I mean, in addition to that, so basically we reiterate the fact that we need eddy-covariance measurement at multiple heights. We need directly on the soil using the soil chamber, then one at low level EC, another at above canopy, upper level EC. Right now, what I have done, whatever data we had, that is only at the top of the canopy. And here the flux partitioning algorithm, or that is implemented over the top of the canopy measurement, which basically represents, so basically in this flux partition algorithm, we could not differentiate between grassland and forest. That is why we assume it is mostly forest. But as Phule is saying, grassland contributes, and we do not know how much it is contributing to which direction. For that, if we can have a lower level EC measurement, that will help our purpose. Sir, I think that is what we are trying to say, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. That was a very comprehensive answer, and also your presentation was very nice. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Pramit. So, any other committee members have any question? Okay. So, I do have a very quick question, Pramit. So, your ISA model, I saw that during the summer season, they have a very high frequency variation in NEE. So we also have looked at any variation during summer monsoon season and hypothesized that due to the monsoon intra-seasonal variability, NEE also co-vary. So did you find any similar variability in NEE in ISA model?
Sir, actually, I am analyzing those results. So there are interannual variabilities as well, interannual and seasonal variabilities as well.
Yeah, I was talking about intra-seasonal variability.
Okay. Sir, actually, yeah, that's what I'm telling you. There are inter-seasonal variabilities as well. There are variabilities interannual, then intra-annual, inter-seasonal, and inter-seasonal. There are variabilities. Yes.
Yeah, because similar variability also noticed in a FluxNet-based NEE calculation from China. They also have reported. They also cited our paper that in Indian monsoon region also this is observed. I mean, this is calculated.
Yeah.
They also could find similar variability.
Sir, actually, I mean, this gives me an opportunity to say a few more words if I'm allowed. So
actually, we are running out of time here.
Okay.
So maybe we can have offline discussions on.
So just shortly, just one line. I will not take more than a second. China is actually towards more to the subtropical. China basically, I mean, apart from this lower China, this eastern southeast China, most of the ecosystems are at higher altitude, more than 30. So their variability will be, of course, less than the subtropical or tropical forest. So it may not be a very good idea, but yes, if you are looking at Xishuangbanna or then the southeastern part of China, then it will be more representative. I mean, it will be more well suited to compare with our ecosystem. That's what I wanted to say. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Pramit. And Dr. Professor Anand, do you have any say here?
No, nothing.
Okay. So if there is no more comments, I thank Pramit for his synopsis webinar, and thank you everyone for joining, and I thank the audience also. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.